And now today's featured speaker is Callie Patrick, graduated from Bentley with a master's in human factors and design in 2004. She's founder of her own company, A Journey into Health, and serves as a sleep wellness coach who helps stressed out busy professionals like all of us around the country learn to sleep better and improve their energy. She's also a therapeutic yoga teacher and public speaker. Without further ado, please join me in virtually welcoming Callie. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much to Emily and to Bethany for organizing and helping us provide this webinar to you. As Emily mentioned, I am an alumni of Bentley University. I was part of the Human Factors and Information Design program. Back when it started in 2000, I did the slow program of graduating in 2004 as I was working full-time while getting my master's degree. And it still proves very beneficial to me, even though I've switched careers into sleep wellness and health and wellness. So I'm so glad to have you here today. The webinar is titled 3 Lifestyle Habits Wrecking Your Sleep. And ideally, I'm assuming you want to know about those lifestyle habits so you can start doing things differently and really get the restful sleep that you desire. My contact information is there on the bottom of the slide. You can reach me at calliesleepcoach.com or calliesleepcoach@gmail.com. Now, you're likely here because you already have a concern about your sleep and or your energy. Maybe you're just curious, but here are a few cues that you are in the right place. If you have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or both, if your mind tends to be overactive at night, if you find yourself sleepy or feeling fatigued or tired during the day, many of my clients are those who feel that fatigue but power through, whether that's with caffeine or sugar or sheer willpower. Maybe you've tried some bedtime routines or sleep hygiene suggestions from Google or other wellness professionals, and they haven't worked. You might find that you are suffering from some implications of fragmented sleep or unrestful sleep, like lacking motivation, focus, and patience. I find many people are struggling with that these days. Or you want to learn how to break what I call the stress sleep cycle or the sleep stress cycle. So I'm so glad you're here. The webinar is really designed to educate you about the bigger scope of sleep and energy issues and start to shift your mindset from quick fixes to root causes. As I was saying to Emily and Bethany before we started, I really like to give information that you haven't heard before. So even if you've been researching on how to get better sleep for a while, you may not have had this kind of insight into some of the difficulties that you might be having with sleep. Now, I will say a quick disclaimer that if you've had sleep problems for more than 6 months, I'll be upfront and say that it may take a little bit more than a webinar, even this one, to resolve it. So I do advise you to get help, and we'll talk about why. And before we dive into the lifestyle habits, I'd like to get to know a little bit about you, and then I'll tell you a little bit about me. So I have some of these questions for you. The first thing I would like to know is about your sleep duration and whether you gave yourself enough time in bed, particularly last night. So just thinking back on the night you had previously, how many hours did you commit to your sleep last night? And you can answer in the chat. Based on the number, you can choose 1, 2, 3, or 4. You see the answers on your screen there. So give me a sense of where you fell last night. I see a lot of 3s. Oh, great. Great. I'm seeing a lot of 3s, which is the 7 to 9 hours, which is as you've probably heard, the recommended time for sleep is 7 to 9 hours. Research does show that women may need more sleep than men. So women potentially more on the 9 hours of sleep. And that's more than we can get into in this webinar, but just an FYI. Great. Excellent. Okay. So next question. Did you wake up feeling refreshed this morning? So you may have had 7 to 9 hours of sleep, but how did you feel when you woke up? And what's interesting is that the first time I heard somebody say the word refreshed in relation to their sleep, I really wondered, is that even possible? It seemed like such a really strange and odd thing for me that somebody could wake up feeling refreshed instead of groggy and tired and still exhausted. And this question is really about the quality and efficiency of your sleep, right? Because you can spend lots of time in bed and still not wake feeling refreshed if your sleep is light or if it's fragmented and interrupted, which for many of us it is. Now, lastly, and this is the most important question, is getting enough sleep and waking refreshed a regular occurrence for you? Right. So it's very common, especially if we have a particular stressor in life, that there might be periods where our sleep is interrupted. And this is normal, it's natural, and it's fine. It's not indicating a problem. But when we have consistently poor sleep or consistently unrefreshing sleep, then this is something that we really want to change for a number of different reasons. So I'm seeing some comments coming in. Most people answer this question as like sometimes. Many people who I work with have no clue what that's like. They're kind of like me back in the day. I was like, refreshed, huh? I can't even comprehend what that might do for my life, right? So yes, mind always going, definitely. Okay, so thank you so much for letting me know a little bit about you. Sounds like you're all in the right place. A little bit about me and why I do this work. As I mentioned with my Bentley degree, the first 20 years of my career were really spent in high tech and working in software companies. And after many stress-filled sleepless nights myself, I changed gears into the current phase of my career, which is as a health coach specializing in sleep and energy issues. Now, what's interesting on top of that is in 2015, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness that made it even more difficult to maintain consistent energy. So I know what it's like to have serious sleep issues and how much better I feel and function on all levels now that I've figured out how to sleep well. And my mission is really to help other stressed out professionals with complex, busy lives do just that. I work with people across all industries and work environments wherever they happen to be. I've been doing virtual coaching for many years, and I especially have success with people who have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep because of stress and anxious thoughts. Now, I prefer to focus on what's most effective, practical, and permanent. So in other words, you're not going to see a lot of tips and tricks from me. It's probably the number one question people ask me, what's a tip or a quick trick I can use to get better sleep? And in my experience, following those is the fastest way to get nowhere. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So just a quick slide here. I can do a whole presentation on this. Studies keep showing that as a culture, we really need to reprioritize slowing down enough to get rest and better sleep. Here are just a few reasons why. In the health category, right, long term, we have a doubled risk of conditions like high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, obesity, diabetes, and death. And they are showing now, if you're an old, middle-aged person and you're seeing your parents perhaps struggling with some cognitive issues, concerned about Alzheimer's disease or just dementia in general, the sleep that we get in midlife can be a really preventative tool for making sure that we are sharp in our later years. And it can be a predictor, if we're not getting good sleep, of cognitive issues later. Unfortunately, there's no catching up with sleep. So the better we sleep now, the more likely our brains will continue to function optimally as we age. Right now, obviously, our immune systems are very important. We're dealing with these very strange viruses and diseases. So a single night of short sleep, and short sleep is defined as about 4 hours, can mean a 70% decrease. That's 70% decrease in your immune system function, which means a big hit when you're being exposed potentially to things that can cause serious illness. Now, in terms of safety, when we're not sleeping well or we're sleep deprived, we have slower reaction times. Perhaps you're in a position at your work where safety is really critical, or you're caring for somebody where that's very important. Many studies have shown that when we are sleep deprived and we get behind the wheel of a car or a motor vehicle of any kind, it's as if we're driving under the influence of alcohol. So we know the dangers of driving under the influence, but we get behind the wheel many times when we're tired. Of course, there's increased potential for accidents, both in terms of car accidents, safety on the job, and little things. I find when I'm not sleeping well, I'm kind of clumsy, right? You're chopping vegetables in the kitchen, and you're much more likely to, slice something you don't mean to. So there's a lot of implications to this. Cognitively, we make riskier decisions when we are sleep deprived, and oftentimes we don't realize we're doing that. Right. So that's even more scary to me, I think, than making riskier decisions, is that we think we're fine and that we're not really doing something that's risky. But studies have shown this to be true. You might also have experienced difficulty in learning or retaining information, in alertness, in your memory, in your creative thinking, and your concentration. When we are sleep deprived, we have increased potential for mood and emotional disorders such as anxiety or general impatience. Depression is another one of those. So lots of different reasons why sleep is important. Again, I could do a whole presentation. Every day, it seems like there's a new study that comes out that ties poor sleep to some sort of illness or discomfort or disease. So putting that aside, I'm going to switch into the lifestyle habits. And I'd like you to imagine, you can even close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself in this story. I'd like you to see what resonates for you and see if you can spot the lifestyle habits that we're going to go through one by one. So just imagine for a moment, after a long, busy day, you're expecting to sleep like a baby. Yet when you finally close your eyes, your mind starts tackling all the things that feel incomplete. While lying in bed, you mentally review an upcoming conversation with your boss, and you worry some more about a current event, such as climate change or the coronavirus. The next morning, you get started later than you'd like, and you're exhausted, but you power through energy lulls, maybe with coffee or a few trips to the cookie cabinet, now that most of us are at home. Later, you whip together dinner for the family and manage to clean up some. And that night, you sit down, you're happy to finally breathe and take a much needed rest. But then you remember, oh, I left the laundry in the dryer. So you get up and finish that one last chore. You want to follow the recommended before bed routines, so you sleep well tonight, but you just can't seem to focus or be still when you try. Now, before bed, you feel very proud of yourself because you have chosen and decided to take some melatonin instead of having a glass of wine. You do sleep soundly that night, so you keep taking the melatonin. But after a few weeks, like the other remedies you've tried, it stops working, and you remain awake, fatigued, and now frustrated. So I'll ask, can you relate to any portions of that story? Again, feel free to type in the chat, let me know. And, or if you spot any of the lifestyle habits in that story, go ahead and see if any of those resonated with you personally, or you spotted a lifestyle habit. All right, I'm seeing some, yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of yeses and somewhat yeses. Sometimes my mind doesn't shut off, reviewing the day, thinking about work, right? If you're working from home now and you're not used to doing that, right, there can be even more blurred lines between when you're working and when you're stopping working, right? So let's dive into lifestyle habit number 1, which might be something counter to what you've heard before, which is relying on substances to help you fall asleep, even if they're natural. So I mentioned in the story that the person was very proud of themselves because they took melatonin, a very natural supplement, right? Yeah, as opposed to wine, yay, which might knock you out and be a sedative, but the melatonin can feel much healthier, right? Much better choice. And I'm not saying that it isn't, but most of us know that ingesting caffeine and sugar during the day isn't the healthiest option. We recognize that wine or spirits isn't the healthiest option or way of inducing refreshing sleep. But here's what few people do know. The National Sleep Foundation, other similar organizations share what many people have experienced, that even these natural sleep aids won't cure insomnia. Why? Because whether you're taking melatonin, there's ZzzQuil, or anything over the counter, you're attempting to control your sleep and energy using an external artificial substance. Melatonin in particular simply signals to your system that the time to sleep is soon. It doesn't actually induce sleep the way many would believe. And over relying on these medications and these supplements can actually make the problem worse. Sleep is by its very nature a surrendering. right? It's about letting go, about releasing control. And what we're trying to do with some of these supplements, whether they're uppers or they're downers, right? Whether we're trying to sedate ourselves at the end of a busy day, or we're trying to keep ourselves energized throughout the day, these are trying to control natural energy levels. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But for this reason and many others, over time, staying with these medications, with the pills and the supplements, can make it even more challenging to heal insomnia. Now, as a culture, we love the idea of the quick fix. I mentioned before that this is what most people ask me about. What's one quick thing I can do to help my sleep? But months and sometimes years later, we're still experiencing the same challenges, and we're wasting time and money on the latest quick fix. The only natural sleep is natural sleep. And regardless of the trouble you've had in the past, if you have trouble, your mind-body system does know how to get refreshing sleep and how to sustain energy throughout the day. Now, while it seems counterintuitive, the simplest and quickest path to feeling better permanently is to actually stop relying on all substances while finding and resolving the root cause of the sleep challenges. So I'd like you to remember today that there's no faster fix than getting to the root cause. And I'm sure some of you have experimented with sleep aids or supplements. Gummies are a big thing right now, CBD oils, medical marijuana. I'd love to hear more about what you've tried, what worked or what hasn't, of course, in a more private forum. But for now, let's move on to lifestyle habit number 2. Now, the thought bubble here is, wow, I'm exhausted after a busy day, but there's also this restlessness, like, why can't I get still? And that idea of fighting with oneself, trying to get to sleep. What we really want is having it easy to get still, comfortable, and fall asleep. Typical amount of time, the normal amount of time it should take to fall asleep is between 15 and 20 minutes. And that this just happens, right? There's no big deal. And I'll bet some of you thought I'm going to tell you to stop being on your screens right before bed. Now, it certainly is a factor, but you know that one already. So I like to be surprising, and I'd like to expand your understanding. So the second lifestyle habit here is about failing to release or reduce excess energy. Now, what does that mean? Well, one of my favorite phrases when I worked in high tech and corporate was this idea of drinking from a fire hose of information at work, right? Lots coming at you. And it's a good thing. It's a challenge. It's a, hey, let's be fast and fast paced and ever changing, and it's dynamic and it's great. But that's also a lot of energy coming into your system that you have to process and digest. Right? Stress acquired from working or caring for others, right? If you have family members, siblings, parents, even friends who are struggling and you're being a caregiver or a support system for others, this is energy that's coming into your system, especially if you're listening to a lot of my clients have drama, with friends or with family, challenging conversations, especially, around politics. There's a lot coming in right now, right? So this is all, I want you to think all of this as energy coming into your system. You have to do something about it, right? Agitating content. It could be social media. It could be a television show, right? I love Game of Thrones, cannot watch it because I know it's much too violent and energetic for my system. I will be up all night. Sometimes even reading certain materials will be agitating and energizing to one's system before bedtime, right? I love to read about health and wellness, but that's work for me, right? And so I have to read something that's completely different, like fiction. And so in other words, energy is anything that your mind-body system takes in or consumes that raises the energy level, right? So you feel your system being sort of just amped up and agitated, okay? This does include food and drink, right? I'm not going to talk too much about food today, but of course there are a lot of stimulating foods, what time to eat close to bedtime, right? That's a whole other topic, but I want to, again, broaden your perspective about what energy can mean, all right? So a person who's restless at night is often holding on to excess energy. And this energy is primarily stored in the body. This is especially true if anxious thoughts, which I'll talk about later, aren't a problem, but it's possible to have both. It's possible to have a restless body and overactive mind, or one or the other, right? It's different combinations for different people. Now, some exercise during the day can be helpful. You've likely heard this before, but it often isn't enough to adequately discharge the highly stimulating energy that's built up in our systems throughout the rest of the day. It's kind of like if you were to eat poorly all day and then go for a run, it's very hard to run enough to compensate for how much poor food has come into your system. Right. So we usually don't do enough movement to counteract all the stimulation we take in on a daily basis. So it's more important to increase your awareness of how much stimulating content is coming into your system, how stimulating your daily activities are, so that you set some boundaries about how much you allow in the first place. This can really have an impact on what I call hyperarousal or hypervigilance at night, which is what tends to keep people up or tends to wake people up earlier than they would like. So looking at some sneaky stimulating activities like TV shows or even books, conversations you're having with people that might be contributing. And I will say something about vigilance and sleepiness. I don't know if you heard there was any release of energy in the story earlier, right? Our character tried to sit down and relax, but just couldn't do it, right? They just kept popping up. Oh, right, there's the laundry. Oh, right, there's something else. I call this the Popup Syndrome, right? If anybody can relate, go ahead and let me know in the chat, right? There's just, just this one more thing. Oh, just this one more thing, right? Some of this is practice. Right? The body forgets how to really rest and stop doing, right? So instead of fighting it, you can meet your system where it's at. You can do some movement. You can do some yoga, Tai Chi. That does prove beneficial for a lot of people because it's not asking you to sit still, right? If your system doesn't want to sit still, it's really hard to force it to do that, and it can cause more frustration. And as you might imagine, as a therapeutic yoga teacher and meditation teacher, I also have some techniques for this that can take, wait for it, a whole 5 minutes. So what we want to do is essentially bring down the vigilance, bring down the overstimulation, the excess energy, and allow sleepiness to overtake that, okay? Because that vigilance is a barrier to sleep and to surrendering that we mentioned earlier. All right, pardon me while I take a drink here. All right, so habit number 3. I love this question. I'd like you to consider for a moment whether you've ever looked at the clock at about 3 a.m. and wondered, how am I ever going to get through my day tomorrow? If you've ever asked yourself that question or a variation of that question in the wee hours of the night, let me know in the chat. Have you ever said, oh, I need to get to sleep now because this is going to happen in my day? Yeah, okay, seeing a lot of yeses coming in. All right, excellent. Now I'd like you to ask yourself this question. Have you ever looked at the clock at 3 p.m. and thought, how am I ever going to sleep through the night? In the afternoon, have you ever thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to get to sleep tonight? Most people will say yes to the first question, and they will say no to the second. And herein lies the problem. For many of the clients I work with, and some of the things we've already talked about, the sleep challenges that we encounter at night have root causes in how we are living our days. So when we focus solely on tips and tricks, they often talk about bedtime routines, how to get better sleep at night, what to do when we wake up at night, right? How to fall asleep faster. And they are important, but they can have at best limited and short-term success if we are not looking at the other half of our day. So sleep hygiene, bedtime routines are important. If you don't have those, you must have those. They're foundations for good sleep, but they're often not the only thing that's needed to improve it. What many people really need to do is change how they're living their days. This is easier said than done. This is why I'm a sleep wellness coach, right? Our culture has this always on, I'll sleep when I'm dead mindset, which is not just incorrect, but it's dangerous for the health and safety of those around us, which we talked about at the beginning. We ignore and power through natural energy lows that we experience during our days, sometimes using caffeine as sugar or willpower to keep going. These mindsets and this resulting behavior has an unwelcome side effect. It essentially trains your system out of being able to relax. And that makes it so much more difficult for us for us to rest and sleep when we finally want to, right? So that person who sat down and tried to rest and relax, they pop up, right? Our system is trained to just go, go, go. We forget really how to do that, right? And then it doesn't just turn on when we want it to, right? We go all day, right? And we don't really take into account the natural ebbs and flows of energy. We don't listen to our system when it wants to pull us down. It wants us to take a break, right? And so then at night, when we're wanting to go to sleep, it's saying, well, you ignored me all day. Why should I listen to you? I'm still going, right? So to get consistently refreshing sleep, one of the things we need to start really doing is taking into account the other half of our day and night cycle. We need to make some changes that honor and support natural ebbs and flows of energy throughout our days. And we call this rest rhythm. It's a little different than circadian rhythm, which we hear about a lot. But this is just, as you're going through your day, most people feel a little energy low after lunch or maybe at 3 o'clock, right? Most people can feel energized at certain parts of the day. So we want to ride that wave a little bit rather than pushing through. So we're going, and then say, okay, now we're going to do a bedtime routine. That just takes a little bit of that energy off, right? One of the big symptoms of disrupted rest rhythm is when people wake between 2 and 6 a.m., especially when the anxious working minds won't let them get back to sleep. This is particularly dangerous because during the early morning sleeping hours, this is where we ideally spend more time in restorative REM stage of sleep. I'm sure if you've been looking into sleep, you've heard of REM. If you stay awake here, you're not just shaving a few hours off your sleep duration. You're actually shaving an even more significant chunk off the sleep quality, right? So if you wake up at 4 as opposed to 5, or 5 as opposed to 6, it's not just that 1 or 2 hours, right? It's potentially that last sleep cycle where you are getting much more of the deep restorative sleep that helps you wake feeling refreshed. So I'll reiterate, you're not going to find the root cause of this at 2 to 4 a.m. or 2 to 6 a.m., generally speaking, unless there's a medical issue, maybe. But for most people I work with, this is a symptom of daytime rest rhythm disruption. And it's often why no amount of talking yourself out of worrying or stopping your mind or stopping your thoughts at this time of the night helps. This early AM waking can also be influenced by failing to discharge that excess energy, that hyperarousal, that vigilance that we discussed earlier. So how do we go about restoring rest rhythm during the day? This is more detailed than I can go into in this webinar, but there are specific techniques you can learn, and there are optimal time windows during the day in which you can practice them. Because I know what it's like to be busy and not really have a lot of time to hop into an hour-long yoga class or sit still for meditation. Each of the techniques I recommend can generally be done within 5 minutes anywhere. So if we have some time, I might show you one near the end, but these are available. Actually, 4 ways to help reset your rest rhythm are available in my Sleep Academy program, which I hope you'll look into later if this talk is resonating with you. And because you're a fellow alumni and I want to give you as much information as I can right now, I'm going to give you a bonus habit. This is one that is super interesting to a lot of people. And I think I actually even saw a question pre-submitted about this. But one of the things that can impact us and prevent us from having consistent energy during the day and can affect our ability to sleep at night, believe it or not, is improper breathing. Now, the quality of your nighttime sleep is certainly a factor in daytime exhaustion. But what many people don't realize is that when they're stressed or feeling overwhelmed, their breathing changes, right? So it might get short or shallow or without noticing they're holding your breath. So for just a minute, pause and check in with your breath. Were you holding it? Was it short or shallow? Conversely, was it long and smooth? Let me know in the chat. What do you notice when you pay attention to your breath for just this second? One moment in your day. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of short and shallow. So for many people, living in a state of chronic low-level stress, and I'll actually bump this up to medium-level stress, given some of the current things we're dealing with, short and shallow breathing becomes a pattern. And these breathing patterns actually alter the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the body. So it can lead not only to lethargy, but also to anxiety, depression, headaches, and poor concentration, even for the best sleepers. In other words, improper breathing can create a physiological feeling of fatigue. At night, this patterning makes it difficult to take deep, smooth breaths that are necessary to cue the relaxation response in the body and thereby help us surrender to sleep. So relearning to breathe properly, meaning in a longer, slower, evenly paced way, can have a significant impact on your energy and your overall health and your ability to sleep at night. Now, you've likely heard that taking deep breaths sometimes before you speak, not just in a presentation like this, but before you're about to say something that you might regret. You might have heard that that's good practice. But when you're buried under tons of stress or already feeling weary, doing so can feel impossible. So for those of you who have said in the chat that your breath is either short or shallow right now, or that you noticed you were holding your breath, try to take a deep breath in and see if you can take the exact same pace of breath out. And for some of you, you'll be able to do that. Others, depending on the stress level and what other things are happening in your system, it will be very difficult, right? So it's very useful to work with somebody, a yoga or meditation teacher, a breathwork professional who can help you incrementally retrain the muscles that are responsible for breathing. This is just another example of meeting your mind, your body, your breath where it's at and moving it little by little to a better place, right? If you're very stressed, taking a long, deep breath is going to get you even more stressed out, right? Breathing well also involves the muscles of your diaphragm, your intercostals. So this retraining can take some time and requires some patience. But with a fuller and deeper breath throughout the day, you may notice that your energy levels remain higher and more consistent, even in the afternoons where we start to generally feel sluggish. All right. So I'm going to summarize here for a moment. So we actually had 4 lifestyle habits today. You got a bonus. I want to mention all of these are trainable. And sometimes it's very effective to make small targeted tweaks to one's routine, whether that's to the day or to the night, to the breathing, to the consuming of energy, that can have a big impact. And part of what I help people do as a sleep wellness coach is find out what are the best little knobs and dials to turn so that they're not just overwhelmed with information about sleep, because there's so much out there. How do you know which thing is going to work best for you, right? Some of you may have related to these habits that I put out there. Go ahead and put in the chat. I'm just curious, of these 4 habits here, type in the number that resonated with you most. If you're like, no, I don't, and none of these really resonated with me, go ahead, put a 0 in the chat. Just so I get a sense. You know, sleep is a complex process and challenges can manifest differently in each person. So anyone, I'm seeing some people say all 4, or a combination of these habits could be wrecking your sleep and negatively impacting your energy. There are many others. I actually have some freebies along these lines that, you know, there are 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 of these lifestyle habits. So I choose the ones for this particular webinar that I see most commonly when I work one-on-one with clients, and that I thought would be interesting to share with you all as part of the Bentley community. One last thing I want to say is that establishing healthier rhythms during the day often requires this thing called setting and honoring boundaries. And that's with ourselves and with others. And this can be so hard when we see people around us living a lifestyle like ours, right? We normalize behaviors and ways of thinking. And this is what keeps many people stuck in a cycle of high anxiety, hyperarousal, vigilance, poor sleep, low energy, and ultimately poor health. And I assure you that ignoring natural rhythms is just not normal. More people, fortunately, I think, are starting to recognize that. And I want to inspire you because you can retrain yourself to feel better in these ways. And sometimes this is where getting some support can be helpful. And yeah, I'm seeing still some comments come in about the habits. That's great. Before taking questions, I would like to invite all of you to schedule a free clarity call with me. You can do that through my website or the link here, and we'll send that out afterwards. This is really an opportunity for you to get clear about what you desire most for yourself in terms of your sleep, energy, well-being, and more. And you'll walk away with a greater understanding of the lifestyle habit that's most impacting your ability to get consistently refreshing sleep, so that in the future, you can wake feeling rested, energized, and excited to fully participate in your days. So you can also learn about me and my work and the Sleep Academy, other things I mentioned during this webinar at callysleepcoach.com. And at this point, we have a good amount of time for questions. Or we can also, well, Emily, I'll let you ask some questions. And then if people are interested and are still on the call, I will demonstrate and lead you through one of the techniques that can help calm your system.
Oh, I think that'd be really well received. We've got a great group here. And again, we will share, my colleague Bethany will put Callie's website in the chat. The other thing is we found Callie, or Callie found us through our new virtual online business directory for Bentley alumni. So if you're looking for an alum who does anything that you need help with, Callie's website is on our business directory as well. But we'll put that in the chat, and we'll also send it to you in a follow-up. All right, I know I have a lot of questions, but let's start with some of our folks who've submitted questions here. So is there really, we talked about this at the beginning, is there really a target number of hours that people should be aiming for in their sleep? You know, some people seem to be just fine with 4 to 5 hours. Is that possible?
So the recommendations are 7 to 9 hours. It will vary based on person. But the thing about getting that short sleep, right, the 4 to 6 hours, there are certainly people out there who say, this is what I've always done. I feel fine. I function well. What may not be evident is that behind the scenes, there's damage being done to the system, right? The human body is not naturally designed to sleep that short. And there are restorative things that happen when we are asleep that may not be happening for that person that can result in long-term effects. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, you know, as a sleep wellness coach, I work with people who recognize they have a problem and want to make some changes. You know, if people are not at that point where they're like, I'm not worried about that, I feel fine in this moment, it's very hard to make the case for yes, and long term, your system is going to stop. There's going to be a problem. So it is highly unlikely that a person who is sleeping 4 to 6 hours a night is actually fine. But what happens too is with short sleep, you might recall me saying that our judgment is off. So the people with short sleep will believe that they're fine.
They're convincing themselves that that's all they need.
Yes. Yes. And, and sometimes there's also a disconnect, right? With, we're very cerebral people, right? We love to think, and this is part of why the mind is overactive, right? We're very disembodied in a lot of ways. And so their body might be sending them these little signals that they're just overriding or they're missing. And should they tune in a little bit more, they might start to notice, oh, I'm actually am feeling effects of this, but I've been pushing through or ignoring, right? And sometimes those signals will get quieter, so they'll get harder to hear, or they'll start to build more until there's a real health crisis. And this is often, unfortunately, most people don't see me as a preventative coach.
Oh,
They come see me after there's like a major health crisis, right? Where, okay, I'm unable to work, right? Or I'm having some really severe mood issues, right? So it's if people are starting to feel like they're having some trouble, it's great to nip those problems in the bud, even if there's not a great degree of health issues or concerns. But unfortunately, most people, kind of like going to the doctor, they only go when there's a real, okay, my system is just done. It is shut down. So, and then it's much harder to come out of that.
all right. So everyone on this call, you heard it here first. Start making these habit changes now before we really need Callie's help. What about the effect? We talked about how in sleep habits, people are always saying, avoid blue light at night, but there's quite a few people who watch TV to help them fall asleep. Is that similar to taking melatonin? I know people who watch Friends or other sitcoms to help themselves fall asleep and then become a little reliant on falling asleep with the television on.
Yeah, yeah. And I saw a question come in about napping as well. And I'd like to tie these two things together because falling asleep in front of the TV, I'd like people to start thinking about that as taking an evening nap. And that can often be a reason why people aren't sleeping through the night, right? We tend to associate that falling asleep on the couch with sleeping at night, but it's really a very late day nap. And if we are going to take a nap, the ideal time is actually a lot earlier in the day so that it doesn't interfere with sleep. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is that the television is often used as a way for people to distract their minds, right? To pull focus from worrisome or busy thoughts about work or, stressors to something that is much less anxiety producing. I'm binge watching Friends as well, but not at night. Right, just as some, reminiscent of simpler times, right? But so the idea is that, we cannot really control the mind. We can influence the mind. And so what we're doing here with the television is we're creating a distraction, and certainly the content of that distraction matters, right? But yes, we have the blue light issue. Some people get over that by making sure the timing of it isn't too close to bed. There's obviously all the goggles and things, right? But, how can we potentially do something or let go of doing something so that we really truly allow the system to rest and relax, right? Even watching a show like Friends, which I'm very intimately involved in right now, like can be stimulating, right? Or you start to really get into that, and then the mind starts thinking about, oh, are Ross and Rachel on a break or not? So it's generally, watching television in the early part of the evening, as a part of like, okay, I'm breaking from the day, maybe a fine thing to do. But as we get closer to bedtime, can we come more inside, right? Can we get a little more connected to our body, to our breath, to happy places in our thoughts, right? That are our own versus something outside. So there's a lot of little nuances with that. But in general, like, definitely thinking about it as napping, because oftentimes people will fall asleep on the sofa and then get up and then go to bed and then they're wide awake.
Right. Because they just
took a nap.
right. That happens to me often. And is reading sort of along the same lines? Your mind can continue to keep going.
Again, it depends on the content, right? What you read really matters, right? So if you're spiritual, for example, reading the Yoga Sutras or reading the Bible or something that's very comforting and soothing and makes one feel safe and secure enough to surrender to sleep, right? Maybe that's a very nice way to end your day, right? I worked with a client who was very into world wars, and he would read history books right before bed and then say, I can't get to sleep. Well, right. But we don't always stop and make those connections, right? So the content, the subject matter is very important. It's not just the medium, right? It's not just, is it a Kindle? Is it an iPad? Is it the TV? Is it a hard copy book? But it's, what are we reading about? And what does it create for us inside of us? And tuning into that, because there are sometimes really subtle energizers that we're not recognizing that can have a huge impact on us.
Thank you. All right, switching gears here. This one person's asking, they don't have trouble getting to sleep, but after about 3 hours, they get up, whether it's a natural, waking, or they have to use the restroom, and then can't get back to sleep. What are some things that might be good tips for those folks?
So we're not having onset insomnia, which is when people have trouble falling asleep. We're having maintenance insomnia, which is waking up at different points in the night. Now, I'm seeing some ditto on getting back to sleep. Right. So some of that, again, is tied to how much energy is in the system during the day, how much of that has been released. If you don't release enough, it's kind of predictable that will come up in the middle of the night. Right. So again, I'm going to encourage, even though there are things I can give you to help you fall back to sleep right now, and I'll give you one in a second. But really finding what is causing this during the day. This is where the long-term solution is, right? Because some of the techniques that you can use to fall asleep when you wake up in the middle of the night may stop working, right? They might be good for a little while, and then they stop working because the root cause has not been addressed. Right. One of the things that, one of the techniques, so if someone does happen to wake up in the middle of the night, one of the techniques that can be nice to do, and if the person, for example, is someone who, let's say, goes out for a run every day, let's say that, or they go for a walk and they have a little route, we've all, I think with COVID, we've all been like finding our ways to get outside, right? So let's say the person has a walking route that they do every day. Right. If they wake up in the middle of the night, they want to get back to sleep. In their minds, they can trace that route of walking. So when they're physically out in the world, noticing, okay, there's this statue, there's this house, there's this, crack in the road, there's this lamppost, there's these things that create a little more mindful walking experience, perhaps, which you won't get if you're listening to music or, chatting on the phone, but paying that close attention, having a really great walking experience. And then in the middle of the night, trying to, walk through that, visualizing that can be a very nice way to bring sleep back. But again, I will say that the most important thing is, why are they waking up in the first place? Sometimes there is a medical condition. Sleep apnea will wake people up. A weakened bladder that comes with age will wake people up. Restless leg syndrome. There are certain other medical conditions. So it's important to be sure that it's not some situation that can be serious and need to be addressed by a medical professional. And that's the other consideration. Some people, sleep apnea, they get a CPAP, they're done.
And that helps, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. We had some questions around the breathing. If that's where you think that's where you need the most help, and that's what you're going to focus on as your takeaway from today's talk, where would you start? Would meditation help? And you think about your breathing all day, up, even all the way up until the night?
Yeah, I saw that question come up, and this is a great segue. I'll teach you one of my go-to techniques. And it's part of the Sleep Academy. It's part of the rest rhythm. So this is a really simple breathing technique that you can do anywhere, and we'll do it together. And Emily, you'll be, since you're the only one
I need the help.
Yeah, everybody can do it. I'm going to hold my hands up because it requires using your hands, but your hands can be in your lap with the palms facing up. Right. And if it's comfortable, just like imagine that your eyes could get just a little soft, and you're going to need to watch me, but just like let the eyes soften, and eventually we'll close them once you get the pattern. Okay, so my hands are here. I like it to bring the thumbs to the base of your index fingers, just like this. It might feel a little strange. You might need to look, right? So the next time you inhale, so when you breathe in, I want you to slide the thumb up to the tip so that you make kind of an okay sign. And when you exhale, you'll slide the thumbs back down. Then you'll move to the middle finger. You'll inhale and slide up. And you'll exhale and slide down. And then ring finger will be next. So inhale, slide up. Exhale and slide down. Hope everybody's doing this with us. Pinky finger, inhale, slide up. Exhale, slide down. Now we're going to do the pinky finger again. And then move back to the ring finger. So we're going back down the hand, one finger at a time. Middle finger next. And when you get back to the index finger, that's called one round. So we started with the index finger, gone to the little finger, and then reverse the direction. That's one round. I'd like you to all to continue that. And if it's comfortable, let your eyes close. Let the hands just be in the lap. I'll continue to do it if people need a visual. But the more you can close the eyes for a moment and just come inside, feeling the gentle touch of the fingers sliding up and sliding down. And you're not trying to control your breath. You're just timing the breath with the movement. We'll do a few rounds of this. So just take a moment, continue doing it, and I'll bring you back. We'll do another minute. So really just let yourself settle in. And there's no rush at all. The next time you're back down at the index finger, you can stop moving the fingers. Do keep the eyes closed and notice how you're feeling. And again, there's no rush. When you're ready, the eyes can come open. And feel free to type any comments or feedback in the chat about that very short exercise. We call this Nasya. It's a finger breathing technique. Emily, did you notice anything?
I did. I was very calmed. I really didn't get very much sleep last night. And so I was worried I might fall asleep right here. But it was very calming. When I wake up in the middle of the night, for me, what helps is counting back from 100.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds so old school, but that for me is like very calming and rhythmic. So I feel like there was some of the same thought behind that practice.
Yeah, this is one of these exercises that I would recommend for people who have trouble sleeping at night, either falling asleep or staying asleep, especially with the anxious mind, but really any issue. Try to do this once during the day. Remember, we talked a lot about the day, right? And training the system, right? If you only do this when you're stressed and anxious and awake, it might work. But it will have a better likelihood of working if you have started to train your system. Oh, a couple minutes of this, right? We did probably 2 minutes. And one of those minutes was you all learning how to do it, right? So you can teach this to your kids, right? This is something that is really beneficial for anxiety, for helping your nervous system calm down, for reducing that vigilance. And it can be done in bed, lying on your back, right? So this is one of the techniques that I love to use. And for most people, not all people, but for most people, they will feel the effects of it pretty quickly. But I'd say find 5 minutes in your day and do this, right? Just to kind of restart.
That's great. Thank you so much, Callie. We only have a few minutes. I don't know if there are some questions that you'd prefer to answer. I know we did get questions about, again, the day being so important. Is coffee, are coffee and tea things that really impact our sleep cycle if you're drinking them throughout the day?
Yes, and that's going to be dependent on the person, right? That again, that's energy input. What other energy input is coming in, and how does their system process caffeine, right? So different people are going to have different effects, and part of it is really learning to pay attention to the subtle signals, right? When I drink coffee, I love coffee. I have it in the morning, but I notice that there is an energy that builds in my system from it. Right. So I'm also very careful about what time I stop drinking it, how much that I have. Am I drinking enough water to kind of offset some of it? Right. So everybody's very unique. Right. And part of, I think, what happens is that we're impatient and we want the quick, just give me the thing to do and I'll do it. But there has to be some level of exploration and self-discovery and awareness. This is where things like mindfulness really come into play, because we have to really start to connect to the deeper parts of ourselves, figure out, well, I don't care what they say, what's really right for me. So that's a lot of what I help people do.
Thank you so much. This is great. We have so many more questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question, but Callie's there. You can certainly reach out to her. She's offering a free one-on-one 30-minute session to get you jump started, so then you can continue to work with her. Callie, anything else that you want to end out the session with?
No, I thank you so much for coming. I see many people are still on the call, so thank you so much for your attention and your willingness to learn something different. And I hope I provided that to you. And do please reach out. I love talking to people about their sleep and seeing if I can help. And that's regardless of whether sleep coaching is the right approach. I'll always tell you if it's not.
Perfect. That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much, and sleep well, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.